Tayyib, okay, inshallah, we'll go ahead and get started. Does anybody need a copy of the slides that we're going over? Who didn't get a slide? You all didn't get a copy. These are the copy of the slides, inshallah. You all want copies of the slides? Let's see this. How many? One, two? Just one or two? Or how many do you all need? Two? Anybody else? Anyone else? Everyone good? Okay. All right. The lights are kind of dim in here, so I apologize. And I don't know how to work the lighting system. I know how to pull teeth and do root canals and things like that, but I don't know how to work the lighting system in here. So, inshallah, we'll go ahead and get started. طيب. Bismillah. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم. Naam. So we're continuing with our class in fiqh from the book Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah fil-Masaa'il il-Fiqhiyyah by Al-Imaam Muhammad ibn Alee Ash-Shawkaanee rahimahullah ta'ala. So in the previous lessons, besides discussing the basics of fiqh and the history of the madhahib al-fiqhiyyah, the fiqh madhabs, the fiqh schools or the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, if you will, over the history, and those a'immah, those imams, or what we call fuqaha, the scholars of fiqh, the jurists. We discussed the biography, something of the biography of Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee himself, and we said he was from the Yemen. He was from Yemen, from a place called Hijrat al-Shawkaan, which is a area or village, if you will, outside of the city of Sana'a, but he was raised in Sana'a. And we talked about something of his life, his biography in reference to his studies and his level of knowledge that he achieved and so forth. Then we went into the book. We began with Kitab al-Tahara, in which we are still in now. We're in the book of al-Tahara. And the first thing we discussed, the first section, Tahara meaning purification, the chapter of purification. And he began with the section of Bab al-Miyah, the section dealing with water and its different types and its categories, and the classification of water and how we determine what water we can use and not use to purify ourselves for ritual acts of worship. Then he went into the section of Bab al-Najasat, the section regarding impurities and what things are impure. When we say impurities, we mean those things that ritually, if they get on your body, or if they get on your clothing, or if they get on the place where you have to pray, then you must wash it off. You must remove it before you can perform prayer in that garment or in that place, or etc. It does not mean that you have to make wudhoo if it gets on you. We discussed this confusion that some people have. They thought that in the class, we came to the conclusion that some people are of the understanding that if you get something that is impure on you, that it breaks your wudhoo. But this is not the case. If you get something of a najasat on your body, or on your clothing, your garments, or on the place where you're going to pray, then what is incumbent upon you, what is obligatory upon you, is to remove that thing by washing it. Okay, is to remove it. Okay, but not that you have to make wudhu again, that it breaks your wudhu, breaks your ablution, your state of purity. Okay, and so we talked about what are those najasat. Then we talked about the Shaykh. Went to the next section, Bab Tathhir al-Najasat, the section regarding how to remove the impurities and how to cleanse the impurities. Then we talked about he went into the next section, Bab Qada al-Haja, the section regarding the etiquettes of relieving oneself, using the restroom, the etiquettes of relieving oneself, using the restroom. And then last week we discussed Bab al-Wudhoo, we began the section of al-Wudhoo, the purification, how to make ritual cleansing of oneself, or what we say in English, ablution. Okay. So just going back over to review that section, since that's what we went over last week, real quickly, because we don't want to take up a lot of time, but just to review real quickly what he said last week. The Shaykh, he said, يَجِبُ عَلَى كُلِّ مُكَلِّفٍ أَنْ يُسَمِّيَ إِذَا ذَكَرَ. It's obligatory upon every person who remembers, every person who's a mukallif. And what do we say is a mukallif? There are three things we discussed about al-mukallif. What is taklif? We said mukallif is what? Regarding mukallif means someone who's responsible. A person who's responsible for the acts of worship in Islam They're held accountable for them. They're responsible for fulfilling the obligatory acts of worship. What are the three things regarding them that we mentioned? What makes them? That they must be aqil, someone who is sane. They have their sanity. It's not someone who's majnoon, someone who has a mental illness or who is, does not have his proper thinking, they're insane or something like this. The person must be aqil. They have proper senses, proper reasoning. They understand what's going on. Okay, they're sane. What's the next thing? They must be baligh. Baligh means they've reached the age of puberty. They have reached the age of puberty where they're considered, according to the Islamic law, they're considered adults. Meaning everything that's obligatory upon the adult Muslim is obligatory upon them once they reach that age of puberty. And then the last thing, how does one, when does the obligatory acts of worship become, when do the acts of worship in Islam become obligatory upon a person? When they become a Muslim. So the third condition, al-Islam. Al-Islam. The person must be a Muslim. So we're saying al-Muslim, al-Aqil, al-Baligh. The person who is a sane adult Muslim. This person is mukallaf. They're held responsible for the obligatory acts of worship in Islam unless they have what we call udra shar'iyyah. Or they have a rukhsa. They have a permission, an excuse, a valid Islamic excuse from the legislation of Islam that says, okay, for this thing that's not incumbent upon you because of such and such excuses. But in general, if there's no excuse, then these people are, the person who's a sane adult Muslim is responsible for fulfilling the obligatory acts of worship in Islam. So he says it's obligatory upon every mukallaf, every person who's an adult, sane Muslim, that when they want to pray, he said, and yusammiya idha dhakara, is that if they want to make wudu, they mention that they say Bismillah. If they remember, if they want to make wudu, if they remember to do so, it's obligatory upon them to say Bismillah. They make their wudu and they say in the name of Allah. And this is based upon the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, La salata liman la wudu'a lah, wa la wudu'a liman lam yadhkur ismallah alayhi. The Prophet, he said, there's no salat for the person who is not in a state of ritual purity. They did not make ablution, okay, wudu. And he said, and there's no wudu for the one who does not, lam yadhkur ismallah alayhi. The person did not mention the name of Allah over his wudu, meaning he didn't say Bismillah before he began, okay, he or she. So he says it's wajib, it's obligatory to say Bismillah before you begin the wudu. And he says, وَيَتَمَضْمَضُ. And then the person, they must rinse out their mouth, وَيَسْتَنْشِقُ. And they blow water out of their nose. ثُمَّ يَغْسِلْ جَمِيعَ وَجْهِ. Then the person washes all of their face, okay. ثُمَّ يَدَيْهِ مَعْ مِرْفَقَيْهِ. Then the person washes his hands and his arm all the way up to the elbows, along and including the elbows. And then he says, ثُمَّ يَمْسَحْ رَأْسَهُ مَا أُذْنَيْهِ. Then the person wipes his head and including the two ears also with water, wet hands over the head, and then also the ears along with that, because the ears are included with the head, okay. And then he said, it's acceptable for the person to wipe some of his head, meaning the front part of his head, meaning if he's wearing a turban. He says that's why he goes on to say, wal-Mashu ala al-Imamah, and the person may wipe over their turban or their head wrapping. If they have a head wrap, they can wipe over that. Meaning they don't have to remove it and untie it to wipe over their head. If they're wearing it and they put it on when they were in the state of wudu, they can just wipe over it. And in some narrations it mentioned the Prophet even wiping it over the turban, and he just wiped the front part of his head, hair, like this. In other words, he didn't wipe all of the head, okay, if he had a covering on it. And so this is what he mentioned. Then he went on to say, then the person, ثُمَّ يَغْسِلُ رِجْلَيْهِ مَعَ الْكَعْبَيْنِ. Then the person washes his 2 feet along with the ankles, including the ankles. And we also mentioned that the person must wash their heels as well. Okay. And he says, وَلَهُ الْمَسْحُ عَلَى الْخُفَيْنِ. And the person may wipe up over their 2 socks as well. In other words, if the person put on their socks when they were in the state of wudu, and then later on they break their wudu, and they want to renew the wudu to pray, they don't have to remove the socks. When they get to that part, the feet, when making wudu, they can wipe over the socks. They wipe over the top of the socks, right and left, okay, instead of removing them. And then he says, وَلَا يُكُونُ وُضُوءًا شَرْعِيًّا إِلَّا بِالنِّيَّةِ لِإِسْتِبَاحَةِ الصَّلَاةِ. And he said the wudu is not considered legislated Islamically except for if the person has the intention. They make intention to, they have the niyyah. And as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, actions are always according to the intentions, and every person will only get what they intended. So the scholars take from this hadith, they use this hadith as a proof that for all of the acts of worship of Islam, the person must have the niyyah, the intention that they're doing this act of worship for Allah, that they're performing this act of worship for Allah. So they must have the intention that they're doing this act of worship, this wudhu, so that it will be lawful for them or permissible for them to pray, to perform the ritual act of prayer. In other words, if you just get yourself wet, but you didn't have intention to purify yourself ritually for prayer, then that's not considered wudhu. Like, for example, if a person is caught in the rain, they're on their way home from work. I'm just giving a scenario. The person is on their way home from work. They get off of the bus or they get out of their car and they have to run to their house or their apartment or whatever, and they didn't have an umbrella and it's pouring rain. We have like a storm like we have like recently here, and they get drenched. They're soaked. And then they get inside. They realize, hey, it's time for salat. In every part of my body that would be obligatory to wash for salat is wet. So I have wudu. I can just pray. No, they must have the intention. The niyyah must be there first. That I'm getting wet. These limbs are being wet, washed for the sake of prayer, performing prayer, an obligatory act. Not just later on I realized I was wet and now I'm going to consider that wudu. This is not accepted. Okay, all right. Oh, so now that's what we discussed in the previous. We had some discussion about the details and explanation, but this is the generality of the affair. This was what the text stated. So, no.
As you say now, if we have intention or niyyah, so if we are waiting when we are getting from the car or to go to the home, so we can pray on that.
Say it again now. Repeat it. Repeat the question again. I just saw it.
Yeah, because if we have a niyyah,
Yep.
the intention, when we are get off the car, if it is raining,
Right.
so we can pray on that.
If you have the intention that this is for purification, then yes, you can pray on that. Like some of the scholars even mentioned, if the person, even if they go into like a birkat al-sibah, a swimming pool, and they have the intention to purify themselves, then they said this is acceptable because it's even more than wudu. Your whole body is like ghusl. Your whole body is becoming wet. And they have the niyyah. So the ghusl is even more than the wudu in purification in its status. Okay?
And the number of the count.
No. And we're going to talk about that today. This is what we're going to talk about now. And someone else, a sister asked that last week. What about washing 3 times, whatever? If you notice, the sheikh, he didn't mention any of that, what you just said, washing 3 times and all that. That's not mentioned. Because he was mentioning what we just read through. Those are the obligatory things of the wudu. That's the obligation of the wudu. But today we're going to discuss recommended acts of the wudu. Yani al-Mustahabbaat, those things that are recommended. Not wajib, not obligatory, but mustahabbat. That's preferred. Afdal, they're better, but they're not obligatory. Okay? So the Shaykh, this section, he said, Yustahabbu at-tathlithu fi ghayri al-ra'si. It is recommended to wash each body part 3 times, except for the head. Wa italatu al-ghurrati wa tahjil. And to lengthen the streaks of water that touch the limbs. So we're talking about, notice he began this section by saying, wa yustahabbu. This means it is mustahab, mandub, it is recommended, not wajib, not fard, not obligatory, but it is better for the wudu. It will increase the blessings of your wudu if you do this. Whereas in the previous section, the previous fasl, he began by saying, yajibu ala kulli mukallaf. It's obligatory. Yajibu is this verb comes from the word wajib, which means it's obligatory. So that what he talked about in that previous fasl, that previous section, what we just read through before we clicked to this slide, was min wajibat al-wudu, the obligatory things of the wudu that you have to do for the wudu to be considered acceptable, sahih, valid. But now he's going into these things that, okay, those were the obligatory things. Now we're going to talk about some things that you can do for the wudu that will increase it in its reward, the ajr. But it's not obligatory. If you leave it out, the wudu is still okay. Okay? And of that is the first thing he said, yustahabbu at-tathlithu. It's recommended to wash each limb 3 times. Fi ghayri al-ra's, and other than the head, because there's not an authentic narration to say wash the head 3 times. Because the ra's, what did we say about the ra's? Last week we said regarding the ra's, the prophets, the head. When I'm saying ra's, this means the head. The verse in the Qur'an, Allah says, "Wamsuhu bi ru'usikum." Wamsuhu bi ru'usikum. Allah said, wipe over your heads. Allah didn't say waghsulu, wash your heads, like washing with pert or whatever the shampoo is. Not ghusl of the ra's, but masah. Wamsuhu bi ru'usikum. Wipe over your heads. And from the sunnah of the Prophet, how the Prophet showed how to do it from the authentic hadith, that he took his hands, moist hands, they were just wet hands, and he took them from the front of his hairline over his hair to the back of the hairline and brought them back again. And then he wiped the ears. That's all he did. He didn't do that 3 times, like this. Only once. So that's why the Shaykh says, fi ghayri al-ra's, meaning in other than the head. But for the limbs, al-a'dha, meaning the arms and the feet, and even washing the mouth, it's recommended to do those things 3 times. Okay, it's recommended to do those three times, all right? But not for the head, okay? And then this thing about italatul ghurrah wa tahjil, this elongating the streaks, lengthening the streaks of the water that touch the limbs. This is based on a hadith with the Prophet ﷺ. He mentioned that on the Day of Judgment, that his followers will be recognized by the spots or streaks of light on their limbs, and he will say he said it will be from min athar al-wudhoo, from the min athar al-wudhoo, it's from the remnants from their making wudu so much in this life. They're making the wudu. So the Prophet says, so whoever amongst you is able, then let him elongate those streaks of water when he makes the wudu. So you wash like this, not just sprinkle a little water here and there, but the whole arm and include the elbow. Make it long, long, elongate the streaks. That's what he's talking about. Because on the Day of Judgment, the believers, the Muslims, will be recognized by those places on their limbs where they wash like that, will be enlightened, will be bright, or like this. Similar to how you can recognize for the horses, you see a horse that has white patch on its arms or on its legs or whatever. You see this horse has these white marks on its leg or arm. Like this is what it's talking. This is the believers will have the bright marks on their limbs from making wudu. Now, tayyib. So this is what he's talking about in that section. So he says the next thing in reference to, we're still continuing what of those recommended acts of wudu. He says wa taqdeemu siwak. Taqdeemu siwak. It is also recommended to brush the teeth before performing, he's talking about before the wudu. Okay? وَغَسْلُ الْيَدَيْنِ إِلَى الرُّسْغَيْنِ, and to wash the hands up to the wrists. ثلاثا, 3 times. قبل الشروع في غسل الأعضاء المتقدمة. And that's before beginning the washing of the other previously mentioned parts. Okay, so what are the things he's mentioning here? That it is recommended, it is from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to use siwak. The Prophet, we call it miswak or siwak, okay? The toothstick, we'll translate it as the toothstick. But the point is to cleanse the mouth, to cleanse the teeth and to cleanse the mouth before making the wudu. This is a recommended act, okay? And it's based on a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, لَوْلَا أَنْ أُشَقَّ عَلَىٰ أُمَّتِي لَأَمَرْتُهُمْ بِالسِّوَاكِ عِنْدَ كُلِّ صَلَاةٍ مُتَفَقٌ عَلَيْهِ. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, were it not for me, if it were not for me making a difficulty upon my ummah, making things hard upon my followers, then indeed I would have commanded them to use the toothstick, meaning to clean their mouth, clean their teeth, with every prayer, every time they. And in another narration, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inda kulli wudu," for every wudu. There are 2 wordings of the hadith, but there's mutafaqun alayhi. There's hadiths in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, the 2 most authentic hadith collections. So the point is that the Prophet ﷺ, he would have done it. He would have commanded us to do this, but he didn't want it to become obligatory and make things difficult upon his followers. So he didn't command it, but still it's recommended. Still considered recommended. He wanted to command it, but he just didn't want it to become a burden for everyone that also you have to do this. But so it's not. So he's showing it's not wajib. It's not obligatory to brush the teeth before the wudu, but it's recommended. If you can, to cleanse your mouth before you pray, this is of the recommended things to do. And then washing the 2 hands up to the wrist 3 times before beginning the washing of the other limbs. This is from the recommended acts. This is from the recommended acts. Actually, in the verse of the Qur'an that talks about the performance of wudu, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not begin by mentioning washing the hands. Okay? He didn't begin by mentioning washing the hands. Allah said, وَغْسُلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, wash your faces. Okay? Allah said, wash your faces. Okay? وَأَيْدِيَكُمْ إِلَى الْمَرَافِقِ, and then your arms up to your elbows. So Allah didn't begin with the hands. So where do we get it that when we start making wudu, that you see the people wash their hands before they start washing their face and doing their nose and mouth and everything? Where did that come from? It's a hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it's recommended. That's why he's mentioning it here. And he didn't mention it amongst the wajibat, the obligations of the wudu, because Allah didn't command in the Qur'an and the Prophet didn't command it. But it's from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam before beginning the wudu that he would wash his hands 3 times. And then he would start with his face and then his arms, hands up to the elbows, etc. And go ahead and along with the ears, etc. Okay? So you do that before washing the other previously mentioned parts. No. You have a question? No. Before, yes. That's why he mentioned it first, and then he mentioned this thing next. But yes, so yes, before that, before washing your hands, you would brush your teeth or use the miswak or use a toothbrush or what have you to cleanse your teeth. Then you put that down. Then you go to turn on the water and you start washing your. You say Bismillah, because Bismillah saying something, tasmiyah, mentioning the name of Allah. This is an obligation. Whereas washing the hands 3 times, as we mentioned, and using the miswak is not of the obligations. If you leave those 2 things out, your wudu is still valid. Okay. But so the person, for example, we're just imagining it. If you picture it in your mind, okay, you're getting ready to make wudu. You're going to start. You brush your teeth, okay, and you're going to wash your you brush your teeth. You're going to wash your hands up to you're going to brush your teeth, but then you're going to have the niyyah, your intention. First of all, you're going to have the intention of what you're doing, because innamal a'malu binniyat. So let's start all the way back from the beginning. You have intention to why are you doing this wudu? Why are you standing in front of the sink? You don't say anything. You don't make a talaffuz. You don't say, oh Allah, I'm standing here in front of the sink in the bathroom so that I can make wudu. No, this is bid'ah. This is innovation. The Prophet didn't do it. The Sahaba didn't do it. Okay, and from their narrations from Salaf, meaning the Imams of the past of Islam, saying that this is innovation. To the place, they said, the mahal al-niyya al-qalb. The place of the niyyah is the heart. It's in your heart, not on your tongue, not to say it. Okay. All right. So, but just in your mind, in your heart, if you will, you understand why you keep focused. You have a focus in your mind. Why am I standing here in front of this little trough or in front of the sink to do what? In your mind, okay, I'm here to make wudu so I can perform an act of worship to Allah. That's, you're not saying it, but just in your heart, you know this is what you're doing. You understand that. So you have the niyyah. Then you mentioned that you say Bismillah before you start. Now these other things, as far as brushing the teeth, this is or with the miswak, or if you use a toothpaste or whatever, this is recommended. You can do that or you don't do it. But if you do it, it's better. If you leave it off, it's fine. Okay. So then you're going to wash your hands 3 times. All right. And then you're going to proceed with those things we mentioned last week of the wajibat. You're going to wash your face, and you're going to put water in your mouth and blow water out your nose like this. Rinse your mouth out and blow water out of your nose. Also, it's mentioned. It's from the. He'll mention it here. Let's see. Does he mention it here? No. It's actually in the footnotes. It mentions that this thing of rinsing out the mouth and blowing water out of the nose. It's from the Sunnah. It's recommended to do this with 1 handful of water. I don't know if you all knew that, but from the authentic hadith of the Messenger of Allah, if you look at the wording of the hadith, when he would blow al-madmada wal-istishqa, yes, thank you. I'm getting my tongue tied. Blowing water out of the nose and rinsing the mouth out. The way the hadith is mentioned is he did it with ghurfatun wahida, meaning with 1 handful of water like this. He took some and put it in his mouth, and the rest he inhaled in his nose and blew it out with 1 hand. And each time that was 1. Then like this is 2. A lot of people don't know that, and they rinse their mouth out 3 times. Then they put water in their nose 3 times, which is okay. The scholars say this is valid, but it's the sunnah, the mustahab, which is recommended, is to do it from each time with 1 handful of 1 scoop of water. I don't know if do you all understand what I'm saying? Is it? Yeah. So you fill your hand with water. It's called ghurfat yad bil kaff. A scoop of water in your palm, and from that you put some in your mouth, and the remainder you sniff into your nose and blow it out. Okay, that's 1. If you're going to do it more than that, if you're going to do tathlith, do it 3 times, then you do that again. That's 2, like this. This is from the Sunnah, and it's described like this in the authentic hadith. The hadith is in Sunan Abi Dawud and other collections as well. Now, so moving on. Okay, we're going to the next bab, the next section. Bab Nawaaqidh al-Wudhoo, the section regarding those things that nullify the wudu. Okay, and so the Shaykh, he says, وَيَنْتَقِضُ الْوُضُوءُ بِمَا خَرَجَ مِنَ الْفَرْجَيْنِ مِنْ عَيْنٍ أَوْ رِيحٍ. That the wudu is broken, the wudu is rendered void, it is nullified by whatever comes out of the 2 private parts, al-farjain, the 2 private parts. And he says, مِنْ عَيْنٍ أَوْ رِيحٍ, whether it is a physical substance, meaning urine, feces, etc., awrihan, or wind, meaning passing gas, breaking wind. Okay? Anything that comes out of the 2 private parts, whether it's a physical substance or whether it is wind, that nullifies the wudu. Meaning if that happens, you have to repeat the wudu before you can perform an act of worship, obligatory act of worship, meaning salat. All right? Is that clear? Wadih? Okay. And so then he goes on. He said, وَبِمَا يُوجِبُ الْغُسْلِ. Also, the wudu is also broken by whatever necessitates ghusl, complete bathing. Okay? And we'll talk about ghusl. We'll talk about ghusl. But he says, for example, in the footnotes, كَالْغَائِطْ وَالْبَوْلِ. Like, for example, al-gha'it, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. Those are the things that would come out of the gha'it wal-bawl, the feces and urine. Those are the things that come out of the two private parts. Excuse me, from the things that bima yujib al-ghusl, those things that necessitate ghusl, he says, min jima'in wa ihtilamin wa riddatin wa haydin wa nifas. Okay? He says this means, for example, those things that would require one to make ghusl. Ghusl is complete bathing. It's a greater form of ablution, purification than wudu. Wudu is a lesser form of purification that's necessary for performing salah. But there are certain things you do that wudu will not suffice. Okay? Wudu is not enough where you can pray after making wudu if you do one of these things. If you do one of these things, you have to make what's called ghusl, which is complete bathing, a shower, complete shower, washing the entire body. Okay? Those things are, he says, for example, sexual intercourse. He says, ihtilam. Ihtilam is nocturnal emission, or we say in America, we say wet dream, having a dream of sexual orientation that causes one to have a emission of a body fluid, sexual fluid. Okay. Ridda. Ridda is apostasy from Islam, to leave Islam. The person leaves Islam and they come back to the religion. He's saying it's obligatory upon them to bathe, to take a ghusl, and to take their shahada again. Okay. I'm going to answer that question when I finish the after. Okay, just one second. Okay. The next thing is hayd. Hayd is menstruation for the woman. After the woman finishes her menstrual cycle, her hayd, her time of her month is over, and she stops the bleeding. Then before she can return to making prayer, she must make ghusl. She can't just make wudu and pray. She has to make a complete ghusl, complete bathing. Okay. And the last, he says, nifas. Nifas is postnatal bleeding. After a woman has a child, she gives birth to a child, for some time after that, some weeks after that, she still has some blood that comes from her private part, from her farj, her private part. When that blood is called nifas. It's postnatal bleeding, we say in English. Okay. When that postpartum or postnatal bleeding finishes, the woman must take complete bathing, ghusl, before she can pray, do the ritual act of salah. Okay, all right. But while she's in nifas, the woman does not pray, just as if she's on her menstrual cycle for that time period. She doesn't pray during that. She doesn't make salat during that time, the obligatory salat. Okay. So to answer the question, the sister she asked, she said, well, how does a person make ridda? كيف يرتد الشخص عن الإسلام? How does a person leave Islam? Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah ta'ala, he answered this question by saying, he said, the person leaves Islam through the same door that they entered Islam. You hear it? The person leaves Islam from the same door from which they entered Islam. So how did the person become a Muslim? How did you become Muslim? You take the shahada. You declare the two testimonies of faith with knowledge of what they mean and understanding and so forth. Accept the meaning. Be sincere about it, not lying. Okay, about when you say it. Okay, so you say that the sincere declaration of those two testimonies of faith with belief in them. That enters a person into Islam. So Shaykh Al-Albani, his opinion was that the person leaves Islam by rejecting those same things. If the person rejects belief in Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, or denies or questions the belief or has doubt about the belief of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, then this calls the person to leave out of Islam. Just like that's the door he entered Islam. Now he rejects that, or he has doubt about it, he's not sure about it, he leaves out of Islam. Likewise about Allah. If the person believes in Allah, but then they turn around and say, well, I don't know if God really exists, I don't know if Allah, maybe this is a superstition or something, then that person, this is leaving Islam. Okay. So they leave out of Islam by going out the same door that they entered, just like it's a house. Okay. We said, Bunya al-Islamu ala khamsin. Islam is established upon 5 pillars. So this is talking about Islam as if it's a bunyan, like a imara, a building. It's established with 5 these pillars that hold it up. Okay. So look at Islam as if it's a house, a structure, that is built, And the things that make it hold it up and make it strong are establishing those 5 pillars. Like Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, he said, the stronger your pillars are, the stronger the house is. Meaning the stronger you are in applying those pillars of Islam, your belief in the two tests of the Shahadatain, you're making the salat regularly on time and according to the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah, how it's supposed to be made, with khushu' and concentrating, and hudur al-qalb, your heart being and paying attention to what you're saying in the salat, okay? And you fast Ramadan diligently. You make sure to make up any days that you miss, etc. You're punctual about that. You pay the zakat. The stronger you are in the society, the mujtama', the society, the more the society adheres to those pillars and establishes those pillars, the stronger the Islam of that society will be, okay? That's why the Prophet said, "Buni al-Islamu ala khamsin." The Islam was established upon these 5 pillars. Meaning they hold the whole structure of Islam up. Okay, so imagine that house now has a door. You enter into that door to this house. That's how you become a Muslim. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. You entered the door. You entered into the religion. Now you have to start establishing these pillars. Okay. But the Shaykh Al-Albani rahimahullah is saying that you leave Islam by that same door you entered, by rejecting what you accepted to enter it. Okay. Now some other scholars don't agree with that. I'm not going to say that's not ijma. For example, some of the scholars, they held the view that a person, also, if the person abandons the prayer, tarku salat, tariku salat, they say yakfur, هذا كافر. الشخص الذي يترك الصلاة يعني لا يصلي أبدا هذا ليس بمسلم غير مسلم. They say the person who leaves the salah, he doesn't pray at all. We call this in Arabic, we say tariku salah, the one who abandons the prayer. They don't make salah. They say this person has nothing to do with Islam. It's not a Muslim. Okay, and they have evidence for it. First and foremost, being the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Bain al-mar'i wal kufr wa shirk tarku salat." Between the person and kufr, disbelief, and associating partners with Allah, is him leaving the prayer. I mean, this is what makes him a Muslim. If he leaves the prayer, then he will go back to kufr and shirk. Okay, this hadith is in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Then there's also another narration. This is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Al-ahdu alladhi baynana wa baynahum as-salat, faman tarakaha faqad kafara." The Prophet ﷺ, he said, the covenant that is between us and them, the people, is the salat. So whoever abandons it, then indeed, he said, faqad kafara. Indeed, he committed disbelief. Okay. So the scholar said this from these hadith. Those scholars, they say that this means the person is a disbeliever. He's left Islam if the person does not pray. Okay. So some things about this. Shaykh Al-Albani and some others, but Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, of the more recent scholars, let alone the scholars of the past, the Salaf, the Imams of the Salaf, held the position that this hadith does not mean the person is a kafir. Where the Prophet said the covenant between us and them is the prayer. So, and whoever abandons the prayer, then indeed he has committed disbelief. The Prophet, Shaykh Al-Albani said this doesn't mean, he said the Prophet didn't say, فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. You notice the word. The Prophet said, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Indeed, he used a verb. Fi'il madi, we say in Arabic, a past tense verb, for indeed he committed disbelief, an act of disbelief, this fi'il of kufr. Whereas he says, the Prophet did not say, فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ صَلَاةً فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. وَمَنْ تَرَكَ صَلَاةً فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. Whoever abandons the prayer, then he is a disbeliever. Rather, he said, فَقَدْ كَفَرَ. Indeed, he committed disbelief. So Shaykh Al-Albani said, this is kufr amali, he's an action of kufr, but not i'tiqadi, meaning he doesn't believe in Islam anymore. But that leaving the salah is an action of disbelief. But that just in itself, Shaykh Al-Albani said, does not take the person out of Islam. And there's some scholars of the past that held this view, like Abu Hanifa of the Hanafi madhab, and some of the other Imams of the Salaf held that view. And in reference to those who held the view that the person disbelieved was like Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal. He held the view, rahimahullah, that if a person doesn't pray, then this person is a disbeliever. Okay, so the scholars differed about the word. How do we interpret this hadith? You understand? So then you go into the issue, like Sheikh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, he explained in his explanation of Al-Arba'un al-Nawawiyah, his explanation of the 40 hadiths of Al-Imaam al-Nawawi, he talked about this issue. And he said, notice the Prophet said, he said, "Man taraka salata," whoever abandons the prayer. And he said, notice the Prophet didn't say, "Man taraka salatan." He said, "Man taraka salata." He put alif and lam, the definite article, in alif lam in front of the word salat. So which means whoever abandons the establishment of prayer. Meaning the person, not that the person missed a single prayer. If the Prophet said, "Man taraka salatan, faqad kafara." Whoever abandoned a single prayer, if he said salatan, bitanween, with tanween on the end of the word, this is showing that it is, we say, indefinite. Meaning any prayer. If the person left off one salat, like he missed fajr, or he missed dhuhr, or he missed asr, one prayer, then he committed disbelief. But he said the Prophet didn't say it that way for a reason. He said the Prophet put alif and lam on the word salat to show that it means the person does not pray at all. It doesn't mean that if you miss one prayer or two prayer or you missed a prayer here or last week you missed Maghrib that you're a kafir. No, it does not mean that. Meaning the person just does not, he abandons the prayer. Meaning he does not make salat at all. He does not pray day after day after day. He doesn't care about the salah. He doesn't pray at all. While knowing that it's an obligation upon him, but he just refuses to do it. Then Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen, he said this person, if he intentionally does that, okay, knowing that it's obligatory, then he said, then this is a disbeliever. But he said if a person misses a prayer, maybe out of laziness, he was lazy, he was watching Qur'atul Qadam, he's watching the soccer, Ka'sul Alam, the World Cup, or the Super Bowl, something like this. And I'm not saying it's haram to watch sports, but I'm just saying that he delayed the prayer past his time because he wanted to watch the game. Or I'm just giving it as an example, okay? And of course this is a sin. We know this is kaba'ir al-dunub. It's a major sin to abandon the prayer. So this is a big sin. But did that take him out of Islam because he missed that one prayer? No. Shaykh al-Uthaymeen said no. What this Prophet is talking about here is leaving, not praying at all, not that he missed one prayer. And I'm not suggesting to people it's okay to miss salat for football games. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that's not what the Prophet meant, that it would take you out of Islam. The point is if you just don't pray at all, the person who does not care about the salat. And another evidence that those scholars have, I know I'm belaboring this, dragging this question out, but another narration that supports this opinion is that the Sahaba, they said, we, the companions of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we used to consider that a person did not leave Islam unless he abandoned the prayer. They said, and we saw a man that he stopped praying, we considered that guy, he was not a Muslim anymore. We saw this person doesn't pray anymore, and we considered that as from the actions that he must have left Islam. Okay? And there's a narration from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, where he said that whoever does not pray, then they have no share, they have nothing to do with Islam. They have no share of Islam, no nasib for them, no portion of Islam that they have. What do they have to do with Islam? They don't pray. Okay? So, this is very strong from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, showing that they held this matter of not praying at all very seriously, that it was something that could remove you from Islam. So, no, but that was in answering your question, what would take a person out of Islam? Okay? No. So moving on, so he says the wudu is broken by also he said whatever bima yujibul ghusl, whatever necessitates making a complete bathing, and we talked about what those things were: sexual intercourse, wet dream, apostasy from Islam, menstrual cycle, postnatal bleeding, those things. Okay. Also, what breaks the wudu? He says is nawm al-muttaji'. Nawm al-muttaji' is the sleep of the person who is lying down, that deep sleep. Okay. The deep sleep, meaning the sleep where you lie down and you close your eyes and you just go on to sleep. You're out of it. You're in there. You're snoring. You're out. Mouth is open. This nawm al-muttaji', this is what break wudu. This breaks the wudu. But the reason he said nawm al-muttaji', he didn't just say nawm, because there's another type of sleep that is khafif, basit, yani it's very light. And that is like if a person is sitting up and he's kind of nodding. He's like maybe this class is boring to someone. They're sitting and they're trying to pay attention, but they keep doing this. That's not muttaji'. That's not nawm al-muttaji', the sleep of a person who's laying down with the intention of, hey, I'm going to sleep. That's the nodding. Like nodding, and that does not break the wudu. And the evidence of it is that the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they said we used to sit waiting for the Prophet. The Prophet would delay the Isha prayer sometimes, make it very late, okay, until going towards the middle of the night, and we would sit and we would be waiting for him to come out. And they said we would be sitting and our heads would be going, the people's heads would be going up and down. They were talking about nodding, this light sleep, nawm al-khafif hakidha, this light sleep like that. And when the Prophet came out, the Iqam was called and the people would pray, and nobody commanded anyone to go make your wudu again. So they understood from this. Even the Prophet himself noticed that he didn't command them to renew the wudu. So they understood from this that this is not the deep sleep that will cause you to have to make your wudu over. Okay, the slight nodding. That doesn't constitute breaking the wudu. Okay. So next he says وَأَكْلِ لَحْمِ الْإِبِلِ, and eating camel's meat. The wudu is also broken by eating camel's meat. Okay. I know. أيوة إيش؟ أيوة يعني ما أدري الحكمة فيه ولكن يوجد نص حديث عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه هو كان سئل عن أكل لحم الإبل وهل يعني ينقض وضوء. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال يعني عليك أن تعيد الوضوء يعني. فالنص موجود هنا في الكتاب سأقرأ النص. She's asking what is the reason, what's the sabab, يعني what's the reason why eating camel's meat breaks the wudu. So I'm saying I don't know the hikmah, the wisdom behind it, wallahu a'lam, I don't know. But it is a text, it's a hadith in the Sahih of Muslim, hadith of the Sahih, in the collection called Sahih Muslim. And it says, لقوله صلى الله عليه وسلم عندما سئل أنتوضأ من لحوم الإبل قال نعم. They asked the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, should we make wudu from eating camel's meat? And he said yes. A hadith رواه Muslim. The hadith is in Sahih Muslim. So this is a nas, a dalil, على أنه يجب, that is obligatory upon the person, على الشخص الذي يأكل لحم الإبل and yatawadda. It's obligatory upon the person who eats the camel's meat that they have to make wudu before they qabla salat, qabla an yusalli, before the person can pray. All right. There are some texts I'll mention here. There are some nusus, some texts that mention that eating any lahm that is touched by nar, by fire, causes that you have to iyad al-wudu, you have to make the wudu over. But this, and they are authentic. This hadith are in Sahih Muslim and other collections as well. But this is fil-Bidayat al-Amr, في أول Islam. After that, it's not, now this Amr is mansukh, it's abrogated. Okay, the Prophet later on he abrogated this. Initially he said anything that is touched, meat that is touched by fire, any food that's touched by fire, you have to make wudu from it. So like barbecue or something like this, you would have to make wudu. But later on he changed this and he just left it just the meat of the camel's meat. Yes, make wudu. But other things you don't have to make wudu. All right. So that is something that changed later in Islam. And we have some texts like this in Islam that you'll see that something seems like it contradicts something else. Okay? We see tanaqid, we see contradiction between the texts, but the reason is because something was earlier and something came later, that changed that. So you have a nasikh wal mansukh, something that abrogated and what abrogated it, like this, what became abrogated and something else abrogated it later. Okay? So this is one of those things. Okay? So the next thing he says wal qay' وَنَحْوِهِ, and also al-qay' is vomiting, throwing up. However, in reference to this, you see I have an asterisk there, and the reason for that is that in the footnotes it says بل يعني القيء بل يستحب, rather it's recommended to make wudu after vomiting. It's recommended, but it's not wajib, it's not obligatory. لأنه ثبت عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بفعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, it's confirmed from the action of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, وهو أنه قاء فتوضأ, that the Prophet he vomited and then he made wudu. Okay, this is reported by Imam Ahmed, but however there was not a command from him to others. So from this is from the fi'l of the deed of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, that he vomited and they saw him, he made wudu after that, but he did not command it. ما أمر بذلك, he didn't command others with it. So the scholars took from that it's recommended. Some of them said it's obligatory based on some hadith that mentioned that mentions vomiting and ru'af. Ru'af is nose bleeding. They said the blood flowing from the nose and vomiting. There's a hadith that mentions these things as something the Prophet commanded the people to make wudu. But these hadiths are weak. They're not authentic. They're only from al-hadith al-da'ifa. ليس بصحيح عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. They're not confirmed from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. So there's no hadith that's authentic from the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم commanding to make wudu for vomiting. But there is a narration that's authentic, confirmed from him that he did. They saw him vomiting, and then later on they saw him making wudu after that. Okay, so but that's not that he commanded. There's no command from him to tell other people to do it. So from this, the scholar said there's yustahab. That's why in the footnotes it says bel yustahab. Rather, it's recommended, to make wudu for al-qay, for vomiting. Okay, and when it says and like the like of it, wa nahwihi, and that means mithluhu, things that are like vomiting. What is that talking about? It's talking about, for example, we have what's called bile. There's something, sometimes you may have something come up of your food, esophageal reflux or some food come up in the back of your throat, but it's not vomit, but just a little taste you get in the back of your throat. You belch and then something comes up. This is similar, something similar. That you can make wudu from that, but it's not obligatory. It doesn't break the wudu, it's not obligatory, okay? And he says, وَمَسَ الذَّكَرِ. Masa dhakar is touching the male sexual organ, okay? Touching the male sexual organ. And the scholars differ about this. فيه خلاف بين أهل العلم. There's a difference of opinion about this amongst the scholars about this. The reason is there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. He said, لقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من مس ذكره فلا يصلي حتى يتوضأ. The Prophet said, whoever touches his private the private part, his male sexual organ, then he should not pray حتى يتوضأ, until he makes wudu. رواه الخمسة. Al-Khamsa, this is me, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, and Nasa'i, and Imam Ahmed. Okay, it's reported in all these collections that the Prophet said this. And the hadith is sahih, it's an authentic hadith. It's on the authority of a woman named Busra, radiallahu anha. She was of the Sahabiyat, and she accepted Islam towards the latter part of Islam. So the scholars who say that it's obligatory to renew the wudu if the person touches their private part, they base it upon this hadith that we just read from Busra, from the Prophet ﷺ. And they say it's the stronger opinion, al-qawl al-rajih, we say the stronger opinion, the most correct opinion, because she accepted Islam later, towards the latter part of Islam, of the Prophet's life. So meaning it was something that was later on when the Prophet said this. It wasn't something that was abrogated later, because he said this later on, and she reported this from him. Okay. Now there are some who say that it's not obligatory to repeat the wudu or make the wudu over if the person touched their private part, and they base this on another hadith where the Prophet ﷺ was asked, should the person make wudu if they touch their private part? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, no, rather it's just a part of your body. It's just a part of you, so no. And so they took from that, this hadith, and it is also authentic. The hadith is sahih. The hadith is authentic. So they took from this, those scholars, they said it's not obligatory to make wudu for the person who touches their private part, because this other hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. However, that hadith was, and it's authentic, but it was reported from a companion who had accepted Islam in the earlier part of Islam, Talq. And so they said the narration of Busra is given precedence over his narration because she accepted Islam later than him. And so she heard that, she had to have heard that during the latter time of the Prophet's life, later on in Islam. So they said, therefore, her hadith is considered the nasikh, and the hadith of Talq is considered the mansukh, abrogated. Nasikh means the abrogator, and mansukh means that thing which was abrogated, meaning it was before, but then it changed. Okay, the ruling changed about it. Okay, so inshallah, you all understand that. You understand what I'm saying? Is it al-amr wadih? Is the matter clear? Okay. So that's the issue. There's, like I said, there's a difference of opinion about it, but the safest opinion, al-ahwat, wal-aslam, wa inshallah al-rajih, the correct opinion, al-sahih, al-sah al-qawlain, the most correct of the two opinions, is that mas al-dhakr, touching the private part, breaks the wudu. Now there are other narrations that are authentic where the Prophet didn't say al-dhakr, he said al-farj, okay, the private part. So from this, the scholar said even for the woman, okay, because that's more general. If the Prophet, the dhakr, that's the male private part, okay, that's the penis, okay. But al-farj, this is the private part in general. It's not specific whether it is the private part of the woman, the lady, or the woman. There's a narration from the Prophet where he mentioned the wording that he mentioned in the hadith he said, farj. The Prophet said, man massa farjahu falyatawadda. Whoever touches his private part, he said, farj, then let him make wudu. And that hadith was reported by Imam Ahmed, and Imam Ahmed said it is authentic, it is sahih. And the hadith is sahih, it's authentic, okay? So from that, we understand that it's talking about the male or female private part. If you touch it with your bare hand, whether you're cleaning yourself or what have you, then this requires you to make wudu. All right, it necessitates wudu. It breaks the wudu. Any questions about that? Also, let me say something else. Some other scholars, there's another opinion of the scholars that they tried to make jama' bayn al-nassayn. They tried to combine between these two texts, and they said that we're looking at, since both of these hadiths are authentic, okay, since both hadiths are authentic, okay, they said we've tried to put them together, and what we understand from it is that the Prophet, I'm saying, make wudu for the person who man massa farjahu or man massa dhakrahu al-dhakr falyatawadda, then let him make wudu. Then they said this is with a shahwa, bishahwa, if he touches the private part with lust, okay, with sexual intent. But they say if he touch it in a way that's adi, we say just a common, touching it, not for any sexual reason or with any, ma shahwa, with any lust like this, then they say then the hadith of talaq applies, that it's just a part of your body. So they try to combine it like that. Say, okay, well, we say it's obligatory upon you to make wudu again if you touch your private part, if your touching of the private part was with sexual lust or desire. But if the touching of the private part was accidental, or you're just scratching it or something like that, then they say you don't have to make wudu. There are other hadith we apply. So there's some opinion like that too amongst the A'immat al-Salaf from the scholars of the past as well. Okay, So the opinion of Al-Imaam Ash-Shawkaanee, though, the author of this book, Ad-Durar ul-Bahiyyah, is that it does break wudhu. That if you touch your private part, the safe thing, you should make wudhu. Okay. And Allah Ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. And inshallah, we'll stop with that. Yeah, that's the end. So any question about this? Anything regarding this? Yes.
If in the morning you're going to take a shower, but you have intention, that can be wudhu, correct?
Right, because a shower, a ghusl, is, and we're going to get to Bab al-Ghusl, the section about how to make ghusl and what is the ahkam of ghusl, the rules of ghusl. But ghusl is a more intense and superior form of cleansing. It's complete cleansing, all right? Whereas in wudu, you just wash some limbs. Ghusl, you're washing your entire body. So ghusl supersedes wudu, all right? So if you make ghusl with the intention of purifying yourself for ritual act of worship, then you don't have to also go now and make wudu after the ghusl. The ghusl suffices for the wudu. You all understand? Okay? So if you make ghusl in the morning and you're making it with intention that this ghusl is a ritual purification for you, that you can, if you take a shower in the morning, whatever, but your intention is ghusl for performing acts of worship, then that suffices you through your day without you having to make wudu unless you do something that breaks wudu. If you do something that breaks wudu, like breaking wind, passing urinating, or feces, anything like this, going to sleep, laying down to take a nap, go to sleep, these things, any of the things we've mentioned. If you do those things, then that ghusl is nullified also. You have to make wudu before you can pray again. Okay, but if, like you said in the morning, like if the person, like you said in the beginning of their day, the outset of the day, fi bidayat al-yawm, fi bidayat al-nahar, the person yaghtasil, yastaham, they take a shower, okay, and they have the niyyah that they're doing this for ritual purity, for salah or for ibadat, then that's sufficient for them, That's sufficient for them for the rest for when it's time to pray, they can pray with that ghusl that they did without having to make wudu, okay?
And you don't have to make wudu every time you pray, only if it's broken.
Exactly. You don't have to make wudu every time you pray, only if you break the wudu do you have to repeat the wudu, okay? No, this is correct, it's true.
I just want to more now clarify things. I mean, I saw one brother when they make a wudu, and I know if we are not breaking the wudu, we can wipe on the side. The shoes even. But I just want to know, for example, if I'm wiping the shoes, and if I'm loose on the shoes because I'm not praying on the shoes when I'm going to the masjid, so that's really recommended, or?
Yes, it's sufficient, You mean that if you wipe over the shoe, but then you take the shoe off later to pray? That's fine. It's it's no problem. That's fine. Because the thing is, you understand that when you put the shoe on or you put the socks on, you did it while being in a state of wudu. When you put them on, that's one of the shurut, the conditions, that you have to be in a state of wudu when you put that foot covering on, whatever it may be. All right. So when you wipe over it and you're making wudu, when you wipe over it, that's if you're in a state of tahara, purity. Okay. Now, if you take that foot covering off, that does not break the wudu, because that's not from Nawaaqidh al-wudu. The Prophet never said that. It's not from the things that break wudu to take off the sock afterwards. So the scholars understand from that it's if you make wudu, even if you take that foot covering off later, that doesn't break the wudu. Only thing that will break the wudu, even after you wipe over the sock, is the things in the Nawaaqidh al-wudu, the things that we have that are mashru', that we have a nusus, text from the Qur'an and the Sunnah that say this would make you have to make the wudu over again. Okay, and no one said that removing khala al-khuffayn or khala al-hida or whatever, taking off the shoe, that breaks ba'd al-wudu, that breaks the wudu that you have to. You understand? It's not something that breaks the wudu. So when you did that, when you wiped over it, that made you in a ritual state of purity. Okay. Now, just because you take it off, that does not break that ritual state of purity. You understand? No, it's not. No.
And also, one day I did a mistake. I want to learn from a mistake. If I have to pray again, I have to pray that. So one day I forget, since when I go to work, always I make a wudu before I leave.
Right. No.
Because it makes it easy to make wudu
right.
Instead of to take off myself.
Right.
So I was expecting like that, and after I prayed Zuhur Salah, and I remember I'm not making wudu when I was.
Right.
So, what happened about that salah?
You should repeat it. According to Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, he was asked a similar question. He said that if this happens, you have to repeat that prayer. You know, whenever you remember, if you remember, let's say, for example, did you all hear his question? He's saying that usually his habit, his custom, his habit, is that every day when he leaves, before he go to work, he makes wudu. Okay? And he does this so that later on during the day, if he has to make salah at work or what have you, and he's out and about, he doesn't have to take off his socks and shoes and everything and put his foot in the sink. He can just wipe over, make masah al-khuffayn, okay? And that's fine, and that makes it easier for him. And that's good. And alhamdulillah, it's from the sunnah. The sunnah, alhamdulillah, is Allah wants yusr for us. He doesn't want usr, difficulty for us. He wants ease for us, okay? And Islam is an easy religion, make things easy. So it's good that he does it. And it's following the sunnah too, so he's even more reward, you know. So, but one day he forgot. Let's say he forgot to make wudu before he left the house, okay? And so then when it's time to make wudu, he breaks the wudu, then he has to pray. He wiped over his socks, but he didn't put those socks on when he was in a state of wudu. Okay? Because he only did that out of habit because he's used to doing that. But that day he did not make wudu before he left the house and put his socks on or what have you. So when he wiped over those socks, he had not put those socks on when he was in a state of wudu. And so he made prayer like that, Wudhoo prayer like that. So he's asking what happened to that. Later on he remembered that he didn't do it, so what about that prayer? Does he have to repeat the prayer or not? According to the ulama of them, like I said, Sheikh bin Baz, rahimahullah, answered a question like this. I read a fatwa from him asking a question like this. He said, you have to make that salah over, because the Prophet said, La salata illa bighayr wudu. There's no salat for the person except for with wudu, you know. So you didn't have wudu, you weren't in a state of wudu when you made that prayer. So it's not a sin on you. Allah said, we say in the Qur'an, Rabbana la tu'akhidna in nasina wa akhta'na. We say in the Surah Al-Baqarah, the dua, we say, Rabbana la tu'akhidna in nasina wa akhta'na. Our Lord, do not hold us to account. Do not punish us if we forget or we accidentally make a mistake. Okay? And the Prophet said in a hadith, authentic hadith in the Sahih al-Bukhari, that indeed Allah has answered this prayer for the believers. I mean, like any time his followers, any one of the Ummah of Muhammad does something that's a mistake out of nisyan, forgetfulness, they forgot. Or that's khata, they unintentionally, they made an error but not intentionally, they didn't intend to do this wrong, they didn't know any better, it was from jahl or just a mistake. Then Allah doesn't hold us accountable for that mistake, okay? But, so the Shaykh is saying that's not a sin on you that you made salat like that. It's not a dhanb, you know, it's not a sin. But you still have to make that salat over though, because you didn't have that wudu for that salat. But it's not a sin on you, but Allah didn't hold you accountable, but you still have to repeat the prayer, you know. I mean, where you at now?
How long do you have before you have to make that prayer up?
When you remember.
Okay.
When you remember. If you remember it, you make it up, okay? Or until you know. Maybe a person is jahl about that issue, they don't know. But when the ilm, the knowledge comes to him that, oh, I'm supposed to make that up, then he should, you know, make that prayer as soon as possible. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So there's no sin on you. You don't know. You didn't know. You know. So when you know, once you realize and you remember, then as soon as you get a chance, inshallah, fi aqrab al-waqt, you know, mumkin, the closest time possible, you know, you repeat to Eid al-Salah, you make that prayer over, you know. Nah. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Okay, tayyib. Nothing else? No more questions? So we can stop, inshallah, time for Salat, I think, or close to it. And inshallah, so next week,